So, good morning, everyone. Online, good morning, Sahil. Thanks for joining us, and Rishi, and Piyush. Um, it's just seems to be a very interesting time for all of us. Seems like a lot of change is happening, and a lot of uncertainty is there. But this is just one of the actual realities of the material world, and yet we get very comfortable in temporary systems, and we think, oh, I have faith, this will work out like this. But actually, everything is completely flipped upside down at a moment. Look at in our generation that we went through the COVID thing.
Yeah.
What a complete flipping upside down of every world system. And whether it was planned or staged or whatever it is, that doesn't really matter. It probably was, but that doesn't really matter. It just shows you the nature of the material world. That at any moment, what you could have faith in as reliable can be very, very unreliable, and can end and terminate at any second. So, what can we have faith in? And that's the Supreme Lord. That's the only thing that we can actually have faith in. And without the Supreme Lord, none of the other systems work anyway. So, here we are, doing our yagya, our morning yagya, of trying to hear the Lord's messages via Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the 3rd chapter, 30th verse, explaining all of the different incarnations of the Lord. And we actually got to the verse, very important verse, mentioning how Krishna is actually the reservoir, the source of all incarnations, which goes against popular belief of a few different sampradayas of Vaishnavism. But this Bhagavad Purana, or the Srimad Bhagavatam, is the final Purana and the final conclusion of Vyasadeva. So this is Vyasadev's opinion. And Vyasadeva himself is considered an incarnation. So we're learning the position of Krishna as well. He's not just another incarnation. He's actually, yes.
By Vyasadeva, you mean like
Veda Vyas, the author of this.
Yeah.
Mahabharata.
Yeah, who wrote Mahabharata?
Yeah, all of the Vedic compilations. He was the one who actually, he actually didn't write them. Ganesh had written them, but he had dictated them and made them available, because in Kali Yuga, in this age, actually humanity once had very strong memory. And you could, hear something, and the intelligence was so sharp you could just remember that thing. So if you chanted a shloka or you chanted a set of prayers, you would just remember it, because once you learned it. So all of the Vedas were given, the knowledge was given via orally. And it was only modern scientists or archaeologists, whatever, they think that, the mark of an intelligent civilization is they started writing.
Yeah.
But actually it's the opposite. The mark of the decline
Yes.
of civilization is when
Now we
they
can
start.
form a simple sentence now.
Yeah, you cannot remember anything now.
Yeah.
No one can remember even what they had for breakfast yesterday. Or maybe they can, but it'll take some dredging of the memory. The memory has degraded so much due to all of the situations of Kali Yuga.
Memory is a muscle which is used, and people don't use that muscle anymore.
Yeah.
In a specific way, I must say. So.
Yeah, but even myself, I try to use the muscle, and it's taking me so long to learn all of these mantras,
It took me like 15 days or 2 weeks to even learn Hanuman Chalisa. So that was the thing. It is a good poem, poem that people learn in India.
Yeah.
It took me 2 weeks of continuous practice to even learn a poem like that.
Yeah, and then what's to see? If you don't practice continually, you forget. It's just a very disturbing situation in Kali Yuga. So what could be done, actually, is we'll learn about in Bhagavatam. But before we begin, we'll of course honor the gurus, and we'll chant our prayers. Piyush, I'm going to first share the screen with the gang here. and I'll hand it over to you, and you guys can make sure Sahil can see and so he can chant along.
Yes, bro. I think you can also see Rishi, right? Om Anjanaatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Shri Guru Shri Utpada Kamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganal Raghunatharvitam Nam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Krishna Pada Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sham He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopika Gopikakanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyacha Kripa Sindhuveva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutare Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Nayanam Namasmitya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarvasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiret.
You go first, Rishi.
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Shrimvatam Swakana Krishna Gune Shavana Kirtana Hidayantastu He Bhadrani Vidunoti Surit Satam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desires for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:2-17. Bhadreshu Nitram Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki
regularly attending in classes of the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of the Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact.
Okay.
If you're going through any troubles in your life, there's the secret. It's Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Service to the Bhagavat regularly, eternally, always. And then there's two Bhagavats. There's the book Bhagavat that you have in your hand, and then there's the person Bhagavat, the person exemplifying that. And this is also known as Sri Guru. That could take many different forms. We talked about this extensively, so I'm not going to get into it again today. But Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. So let's do it right now. Let's serve the Bhagavats by hearing their messages and cleanse ourselves of our material desires. And we'll see what happens, see how we feel. Text 30 is here. Last verse it said, whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord with devotion in the morning and the evening gets relief from all miseries of life. So it said if we do this, which is part of the Bhagavatam, just by regular morning and it said evening too, no more miseries are coming for you. So we will move forward. Etad rupam bhagavato Hyarupasya chidatmanaha Maya guner virachitam Mahadadi viratmani Etad, all these rupam, forms, Bhagavata, of the Lord. He, certainly, Arupasya, of one who has no material form. Chitatmanaha, of the transcendence. Maya, material energy. Gunai, by the qualities. Virachitam, manufactured. Mahat adibi, with the ingredients of matter. Atmani, in the self. Translation. The conception of the Virat, universal form of the Lord, as appearing in the material world is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and the neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord's having form. But factually, the Lord has no material form. So now we're going to learn a little bit about the Lord. We see everything through material senses. But actually, the Lord is not perceived that way. And the way you can perceive the Lord through the material senses is actually an imagination of reality. So let's hear what Prabhupada has to say. The conception of the Lord, known as the Vishwarupa, or the Virat Rupa, is particularly not mentioned along with the various incarnations of the Lord, because all the incarnations of the Lord mentioned above are transcendental, and there is not a tinge of materialism in their bodies. There is no difference between the body and self as there is in the conditioned soul. The Virat Rupa is conceived for those who are just neophyte worshippers. For them, the material Virat Rupa is presented, and it will be explained in the second canto. In the Virat Rupa, the material manifestations of different planets have been conceived as his legs, hands, etc. Actually, all such descriptions are for the neophytes. The neophytes cannot conceive of anything beyond matter. The material conception of the Lord is not counted in the list of his factual forms. As Paramatma or Supersoul, the Lord is within each and every material form, even within the atoms, but the outward material form is but an imagination, both for the Lord and for the living being. The present forms of the conditioned souls are also not factual. The conclusion is that the material conception of the body of the Lord as Virat is imaginary. Both the Lord and the living beings are living spirits and have original spiritual bodies. So Prabhupada is talking about something very interesting, and it's interesting. When I first read this, I had no idea, but now I have a deeper context of what he's talking about. He's talking about right now we're hopefully in a sadhaka deha, or like a form used to perform sadhana. But actually this conception of ourselves, when you look in the mirror and the form you see, this is an imaginary form. You see it, it looks factual, it looks real, but because it's temporary, it's ultimately not based in sat or truth or reality. So ultimately, yes, it appears real now, but this will change. Sahil tomorrow can shave his face and have a completely different form just by that. So I could do it too. Piyush could cut your hair and it's a completely different form now at this point. But it's always changing, it's always fluctuating, and it isn't really at all our real form. But we have become very intoxicated by this material world and the things within this material world, and we've identified with it, and we've made a very crucial misidentification with one, the body that we've accumulated due to actually the desire, and the soul, which is completely different. So actually the soul has a form, and this is called the Siddha Deha, and through advanced spiritual practice one could actually achieve their spiritual form, or it can be revealed. The spiritual form is actually there, but it's heavily covered by this material form of flesh, bone, blood, mucus, pus, urine, stool, all the things that make up the body. But that's not actually who you are in eternity. So this is being mentioned gently by Srila Prabhupada, not with any specific detail here. But later on, these things are also revealed. But so the things of this world and how we connect to the Lord through this world, through matter, are actually imaginary. These aren't permanent forms of the Lord. These are the fluctuating forms of the Lord, called Prakriti. But Prakriti itself alludes to Maya or illusion. So this is not what we shouldn't put so much stake on this. So anyway, these are some things to understand. Even the Murti, I should be careful how I word this, but even the Murti, we have to be careful and understand the Murti itself is not composed of what our material senses pick up. The wood, the metal, the earth, or the paint, however the Murti appears, that itself is not the Murti. The Murti itself is actually the Supreme Lord entering that and making himself available for worship. But that's not his form, isn't the wood or the paint or the metal or anything like that. That's just giving us, the neophyte, the ability to detect it with our material senses, and actually, hopefully, eventually detect the real Lord's form in that, because he does come in that form. Actually, it's very powerful. But that's the form itself isn't the actual material elements. The form itself is completely spiritual. So that's a little bit. This is it'll be more technical, but these are just hints, things for the future, not anything so relevant to what's being explained in the Bhagavatam now. So, next verse. Ready?
Yep.
Yatha nabasi meghogho
Yatha nabasi medhodho
Renurva parthivo nile
Nerurva parthivo nile
Evam drashtari drishtiyatvam
Evam drashtari dushyatva
Aropitam aburibi
Aropitam mabhubhidi
Yatha, as it is, Nabasi, in the sky, Mega Ogaha, a mass of clouds, Renu, dust, Va, as well as Parthivaha, muddiness, Anile, in the air, Evam, thus, Drashtari, to the seer, Drishyatvam, for the purpose of seeing, Aropitam, is implied, Abudibi, by the less intelligent persons. Buddhi is intelligence, and Abudi must be less intelligent. So, clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit self. So this is a nice analogy, but we'll hear from Prabhupada. It is further confirmed herein that with our material eyes and senses we cannot see the Lord, who is all spirit. We cannot even detect the spiritual spark which exists within the material body of the living being. We look to the outward covering of the body or subtle mind of the living being, but we cannot see the spiritual spark within the body. So we have to accept the living being's presence by the presence of his gross body. Similarly, those who want to see the Lord with their present material eyes, or with the material senses, are advised to meditate on the gigantic external feature called the Virat Rupa. This is a very prominent known as like the universe worship. People who are worshipping all the different facets of the universe. But actually it's good, it's a place to start. For instance, when a particular gentleman goes in his car, which can be seen very easily, we identify the car with the man within the car. When the president goes out in his particular car, we say, there's the president. Now they don't like to let you know which car the president is in because there have been things that have happened. But anyway, for the time being, we identify the car with the president. Similarly, less intelligent men who want to see God immediately, without necessary qualification, are shown first the gigantic material cosmos as the form of the Lord. Although the Lord is within and without, the clouds in the sky and the blue of the sky are better appreciated in this connection. Although the bluish tint of the sky and the sky itself are different, we conceive of the color of the sky as blue, but that is a general conception for the layman only. That's not like, right, the actual sky is blue. It just appears blue from the different types of lights and things reflected to us. If you take a glass jar and you go through the sky and collect portions of sky, when you take that glass jar somewhere else, you won't find blue in there. That's something else is happening. So anyway, clouds and dust are carried by the air, it says. But less intelligent persons identify that with the sky. The sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. But these actually have nothing to do with the sky, which is actually transcendental to that, and the air, which is transcendental to the fragrance or the whatever it is carrying that is we consider dirty. So the analogy is spirit is like that. It looks like the spirit is covered by the material elements, but actually the spirit is far beyond all this. There's another purpose for this dirty material thing that we're all participating in. 32. Ata param yada vyaktam avyudha guna brimhitam adrishta shruta vastutva sajivo yat punarbhavaha ataha, this, param, beyond, yat, which, avyaktam, unmanifested, avyudha, without formal shape, guna brimhitam, affected by the qualities, adrishta, unseen, ashruta, unheard, vastutva, being like that, saha, that, jiva, living being, yat, that which, punabhavaha, takes birth repeatedly. Translation. Beyond this gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has his form beyond this subtlety, otherwise he could not have repeated births. Purport. As the gross cosmic manifestation is conceived as the gigantic body of the Lord, so also is there the conception of his subtle form, which is simply realized without being seen, heard, or manifested. But in fact, all these gross or subtle conceptions of the body are in relation with the living beings. The living being has his spiritual form beyond this gross material or subtle psychic existence. We'll see what he says. The gross body and psychic function cease to act as soon as the living being leaves the visible gross body. In fact, we say that the living being has gone away because he is unseen and unheard. Even when the gross body is not acting, when the living being is in sound sleep, we know that he is within the body by his breathing. So the living being's passing away from the body does not mean that there is no existence of the living soul. It is there, otherwise. It is there, otherwise, how can we repeat his births again and again? The conclusion is that the Lord is eternally existent in his transcendental form, which is neither gross nor subtle, like that of the living being. His body is never to be compared to the gross and subtle bodies of the living being. All such conceptions of God's body are imaginary. The living being has his eternal spiritual form, which is conditioned only by his material contamination. So there's a lot to unpack here. You have your gross body that we very heavily identify with. That's the flesh, the bone, all these things. Someone pinches a piece of your body due to our attachment to it. We feel pain, all these things. But actually, you're beyond that. You even have your subtle body, which is composed of your mind, your thoughts, your desires, your emotions, your intelligence, your discriminating factors, how to ration with whatever the mind is actually feeling and doing, and you either accept or reject with the intelligence. Like, for instance, you might someone might mistreat you, and your mind might say, "Let me tell him to, something mean," but then your intelligence might say, "Wait a second, I'm in this situation here. If I say this, it'll cause a bad scenario. Actually, I should not say anything like this," and so on. Or your intelligence will tell you, yes, it's actually a good time to chastise this person, or something like that, and based on the intelligence. But these are all processes happening subtly. You cannot detect them. But right now, you're all making some judgment of whatever is being said right now. I cannot detect it. Maybe even you cannot even detect it. It's hard for us to even detect what's happening subconsciously. But there are things happening underneath. But even underneath that, that's where the spirit lies. That's where the spirit lies. So, to understand the position of the Lord and even the Lord's incarnations, the Lord is actually beyond all of that, beyond the material mind and beyond the material intelligence. And then also, I didn't mention this also, but the false ego, the ahankara, the false identification, which one identifies with the flesh cage or the mind or the emotions and the desires within. This is ultimately the source of our illusion. So this is, the Lord is beyond all of that. This is very technical. There's a reason. Oh, go ahead, Rishi.
There's a question actually here from Matthew. He says that, how do you know when you have a true understanding of his real form when you are in deity's presence?
Matthew, who's
Matthew James.
Matthew James. Oh, wow. How do you know whether you have, repeat it again?
How do you know when you have a true understanding of his real form when you are in the deity's presence?
Well, you can never have a true, it depends what you mean by true understanding of his real form, because the Lord is, he's inconceivable. So you'll never have a full understanding of the Lord. If you did, then that would make the Lord limited. So if you can wrap your understanding about him. But there is a verse, right, in, why don't we quote this verse from Bhagavad Gita that explains exactly what he's asking. It's in the 10th canto. I think it's part of the Chatur Shloki. Yes. So
What I think it really means is, like, when do you know the physical form, the real physical form is present in the deity? How do you know the presence of it? He has his presence. How do you confirm?
Well, he's present within all things, right? He's present in the super soul. I'll read this verse. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritiporvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam inamam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So if you are serving the deity presence with love, eventually he will further and further reveal himself to you. I don't think you're going to ever fully yes, I've completely reached your limit. That's impossible. But it's our tendency in the material world where we want to capture everything. We want to utilize everything for our enjoyment, really. So but at some level, if you have a deep devotion and wanting to, depending, I don't know where your intention's at, but if your intention is to actually love and serve the Lord and want to understand the Lord better so that you can better serve Him, He will give you, through the process of bhakti, He will give you that understanding. So it's very likely in the beginning, since we have very little bhakti right now, we don't have a very good understanding of the Lord, even especially in the deity form. But with continued bhakti, that means first shravanam, by regular hearing of the Lord's messages, regular hearing of the Lord's names, pastimes, qualities, forms, you'll get a better understanding. And then it'll get even further better when you do kirtan. Now you start sharing that with others. You're chanting the Lord's names regularly. You're sharing the messages of the Lord regularly. You're talking about His pastimes, His qualities. And this is going to enable you to smaran, to remember. And when you fully remember the Lord always, then when doing a process like archanam, which is the deity worship, which is the next stage after smaranam, then you might have a better understanding, and that process will feel more genuine. But we cannot neglect these very, very important processes of bhakti. The main being kirtan. Without doing sufficient kirtan in one's life, all the other processes actually will be meaningless. But Shravan is the main way that actually one is going to have the foundation to do kirtanam. So, but all you need to do is once hear the Lord's holy name, and you can begin that kirtan, and that will begin you on the process. So I should mention, for maybe those who aren't so familiar, Shravan means to hear, hearing about the Lord. Kirtan means to glorify or to share, and Smaran means to remember. So these three are the most important processes. So
Yes.
I hope that answers.
Very satisfied. He's saying thank you.
Okay, very good. So, very good. So the Lord He's beyond that, all which we are currently conceiving the world in. He actually asked a very nice question. How do we know that we're...
There was actually, I also had this doubt before when I came to this moment, and I actually researched about it. So I can tell a small thing about this.
Sure.
So what the article said, or the devotees had said, from what Prabhupada had said to them, told them that deities, when they are manufactured, or like their thing, the form is not yet right, but when a pure devotee does prana pratishtha, the ceremony where he invokes the Lord and he prays actually. Lord doesn't have to come, but just because the love of the pure devotee, he kindly begs to the Lord that kindly accept service in this form from these people, even if they're not qualified, but kindly, this is my prayer and love for you. So that's how Lord has been attracted to the deity, and with the proper pran pratishtha by a bona fide personality.
Yes.
And then Prabhupada gave this example that even if a wire is manufactured in a company, it doesn't carry electricity, but when an engineer comes and he connects it to the circuit, that's when the electricity starts flowing.
Yes.
So he gave this example that when an electrician has, or electrical engineer has connected it to the board or the circuit, then it's an idiot who thinks that there is no current, and if he touches it, then he feels the current. So it's similarly that when a pure devotee or a bona fide person does a pran pratishtha, that's when the Lord starts appearing in that form and accepting the service by even from the neophytes.
Yes. This is very nice. So this is how the Lord comes. This is the bona fide way. But even in say you don't get a chance to meet this pure devotee and things like that, but even if you have your own devotion for the Lord, and depending on the level of devotion and sincerity you have, the Lord will accept your service to some degree. But it's so much more powerful when a pure devotee, someone who has so much bhakti, petitions the Lord on your behalf. And then the Lord will really, this is why we take Guru. This is why, because the Guru is, he is our channel of mercy. He's received mercy, and we need to humbly hope that he would share that mercy with us. And even in the form of deity worship and so on, that has to happen just like that, through the mercy of the pure devotees. So this is very good, Rishi. Thank you. All right, let's read at least one more verse. Text 33. Yatre me sadasad rupe pratishidhe svasambhida avidya yatmani krite iti tad brahma darshanam yatra, whenever, ime, in all these, sadasat, gross and subtle, rupe, in the forms of, pratishidhe, on being nullified, svasambhida, by self-realization, avidyaya, by ignorance, atmani, in the self, krite, having been imposed, iti, thus, tat, that is, Brahmadarshanam, the process of seeing the Absolute. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord. Well, there we go. There's also an answer. The difference between self-realization, Prabhupada says, and material illusion is to know that the temporary or illusory impositions of material energy in the shape of gross and subtle bodies are superficial coverings of the self. The coverings take place due to ignorance. Such coverings are never effective in the person of the personality of Godhead. Knowing this convincingly, knowing this convincingly is called liberation, or seeing the Absolute. This means that the perfect self-realization is made possible by adoption of godly or spiritual life. Self-realization means becoming indifferent to the needs of the gross and subtle bodies and becoming serious about the activities of the self. The impetus for activities is generated from the self, but such activities become illusory due to ignorance of the real position of the self. By ignorance, self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies, and therefore a whole set of activities is spoiled life after life. When, however, one meets the self by proper culture, the activities of the self begin. Therefore, a man who is engaged in the activities of the self is called Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even in the conditional existence. So this is very important, especially this by ignorance. Self-interest is calculated in terms of the gross and subtle bodies. We think in our self-interest what is going to be in terms of circumstances for our body and circumstances for our subtle body, our mind, emotions, intelligence, and false ego. Identifying with this type of personality in this life, in this family, in this nation, in this career, in this thing or that thing. But that's not our self-interest. When our self-interest is turned towards the soul, and through the proper culture of understanding the soul, self-realization, this is going to be revealed through sadhus, meeting other saintly or liberated persons. Shastra, the source, the reference points from which the sadhus all understand, like Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and these eternal shastras coming out. And then ultimately the guru, the already liberated person who can teach you the art, this very subtle science. and this ultimately by the proper culture. So this is how you can see yourself as well as the Lord. You might not see the Lord in his totality and completely. This is impossible, but you will be able to see, you will be able to detect the Lord. So this is kind of an answer to your question. It's maybe a natural question from what we were discussing, and the natural answer was given very shortly after. Self-realization has to be achieved. Prabhupada continues, this perfect stage of self-realization is attained not by artificial means, but under the lotus feet of the Lord, who is always transcendental. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he is present in everyone's heart, and from him only all knowledge, remembrance, or forgetfulness take place. When the living being desires to be an enjoyer of material energy, or the illusory phenomena, the Lord covers the living being in the mystery of forgetfulness, and thus the living being misinterprets the gross body and subtle mind to be his own self. And by culture of transcendental knowledge, when the living being prays to the Lord for deliverance from the clutches of forgetfulness, the Lord, by his causeless mercy, removes the living being's illusory curtain, and thus he realizes his own self. He then engages himself in the service of the Lord, in his eternal constitutional position, becoming liberated from the conditioned life. All this is executed by the Lord, either through his external potency or directly by the internal potency. So the external potency is the Lord's external energies, and his internal potencies, and the Maya, illusion, all of these are external potencies. His internal potencies are his pure spiritual energy, and we're actually said to be tatastha, meaning we're right on the cusp of external and internal, meaning we're not quite pure internal potency spirit, but we're not quite the external, the malleable or changeable material things that, we have the potency to kind of choose where we want to associate. Do we want to associate with the pure spirit and then we can become pure spirit, or do we want to associate with, it's actually said we are pure spirit, but we're so minute that if we want, we can be overwhelmed by the illusory energy of the Lord. And we've all chosen that at some level. We've all taken that path, and now we're covered by the subtle mind, the emotions, the false ego, and then the physical body. We're all in a predicament here. We're all in a predicament. And the predicament is not that, I haven't received my next job opportunity yet. I just actually think everything is a so-called predicament in front of me right now. But actually, that's not the predicament. The predicament is that we're being overwhelmed by material energy and we don't understand who we are. And we can't really act in our self-interest until we fully know who we are. Sure. So this has to be achieved. So this is why I think the Lord has called you into a place of study, so we can all learn who we are before we actually make any decisions for our self-interest, because we don't know our self-interest. So the quicker you learn who you are and graduate your studies, maybe the quicker the next part of life can come. But you have to learn who you are. So here you should learn more quickly, because you have a little bit more of an urgent situation. But so you take this up very quickly. Everyone. It's urgent for everyone.
It's 60 days for us also.
Yeah. So you're both at 60 days now?
I mean,
No.
more or less, but
No, if you get a job and if you are leader from a job, then 60 days.
Yeah.
More than a year from now.
I think more than 60, if we go without job more than 60 days, we will go crazy.
Yes. Oh, mentally yes.
Mentally out of.
But not physically. Mentally yes, we will be in trouble.
So you try your best, but do take this study, understand who you are, and then you'll actually understand how to actually do this job. Because right now our self-interest is completely muddled. So it's the process of becoming a Jivan Mukta. You've heard of this?
Yes.
A Jivan Mukta. Yeah. This is the process here.
So the liberated beings.
Yeah. Yeah. So you must become a liberated being and then at the liberated stage, that's only when bhakti can begin. Only at the liberated stage. The goal is not to just be liberated. Liberated means freed. Freed from the illusions, freed from the sufferings that the illusions cause. But then there's a real stage of existence that happens after liberation. That's when you say you maybe wake up from the dream. You know, if you imagine your dreams at night, the analogy could be, this is the illusory identifications we're creating in the world. But then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh, thank God that was an illusion. And, you know, I had a crazy dream the night previous. Yep. And I was like, I woke up and I was so relieved. I'm like, I'm so glad that's not happening in my life. You know, so actually the illusions that we're creating, this is not reality for the soul. So you're going to wake up through the process of self-realization and you're going to be like, oh man, I can't believe I thought like that. I can't believe I was existing like this, or I was in this type of illusion. But wake up. There's a nice bhajan, Jeev Jago, you know. Wake up, sleeping soul. Wake up, sleeping soul. You know, so this is...
Wake up, rascal.
Yeah, essentially, you know. Yeah, like Michael's alarms. Wake up, rascal. Yeah, time to get up. So this is our process. I think we'll end here. I'm a little concerned because Sita did not... She has to wake up.
She's watching you.
What's that?
She's
watching. Okay. So but she's definitely late on the prasadam offering, which... so.
Can we not just chop some fruits?
What's that?
Chop some fruits.
We can, but she prepared some... She's coming now. Now she's angry with me. She's coming up the stairs. But yeah, we're a little late on the offering part. So what we'll do is probably we'll do some... yeah, we'll go on as is, as we normally go on after this, and then we'll just do a later offering. So, thank you guys for reading the Bhagavatam, taking this study. I wish everyone listening this process of overcoming the illusions of this world. I also want to comfort you. This is also connecting to all types of other spiritual traditions. It's used in easier language, simpler language. When I started hearing stuff like this, there's something really interesting that happened. There was a Saint Paul of the Christian tradition who started spreading Christianity all over the world, and he had the intention of going east to India. But in his intention to do that, he got a serious, I don't know if it was a vision or he got a call from his spirit. Don't go to India. You have to do your preaching here. Like the Lord basically turned him around and said, go here. And the reason I believe personally that the Lord turned him around is because what was happening in India, or the spiritual understanding in India, was... yeah, it was a lot more comprehensive than probably Paul could have imagined, and many can even imagine. And if you study these things,
reasons can also be just very simply, I'm thinking out of my head right now, but that the Indian thing is very dense right now in terms of the spirituality. They are growing so well and they are so advanced. So when you come with this emotional teachings from what you have, you will not be able to penetrate the audience because they're already so versed right now. So go to a place where there's still not something well versed,
yes,
and distribute and give them the source, because the place which already has this abundance, you cannot give them more.
Yes,
they're already fulfilled right now.
Yeah.
So just go to the people who actually need it and don't have this knowledge already.
Yes, this is my hunch on it as well, but
he must have exhausted himself. He wouldn't have marked a dent also.
Yeah,
so,
it wouldn't have. There was a reason the Lord had called him to do other places needed the preaching more.
Yeah.
You know, I actually had this experience where when we're out distributing literatures, and sometimes like a Christian person will want to come and stop and debate with me and talk for so long. And what I've come to the conclusion is just like, listen, you believe in God and you're practicing to love God. I believe in God. I'm practicing to love God. You're out here, because usually they're also out there trying to preach. look at all these people who need help. They're not even at all interested in God. You go get that. You go get whatever people you can gather. Let me gather whoever I can gather, and let's actually do something here. But this is, the problem is people want to fight and argue, and they want to have security. I'm right, but this isn't all an illusory. This is an ego-driven, illusory type of approach to. This is nothing to do with any of the great teachings that, say, Jesus or the others were sharing.
Absolutely.
So anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thank you so much for joining online. We'll end the live here, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna.